Well, hi, good morning. Thanks so much for joining me here in my shop. So I'm getting ready to change some more of the wires in this old 1928 radio, and I'm very hesitant about it since I know doing that kind of work can introduce problems while you're trying to solve them. And also a couple of these, there's a situation in here that's really difficult to deal with. So I'm going to kind of show you my thinking around these different wires and how I'm thinking about how to proceed. Now I have changed some wires. They're kind of out of view. You can see a bit of them there, and they run up in behind here. So I've kind of done everything back here. I've left this existing wire alone. It's in good shape right now. There's no reason to fool around with it. It's not possible for this wire to be shorted anywhere. So it cannot be an element in trouble in this radio. So it really boils down to all these black wires, which are hard to see down in here. Now there's a few different sets, or I can categorize these wires differently and think about them differently. And one set is the heater set, and the heater set is running along here. And you can see can you see it in the camera? I think you can. The wires are twisted. They've been really thoroughly twisted as much as possible where they run between the transformer. I shouldn't say that. I should say the original terminals, or the terminals that receive the power by this orange wire. The orange wire goes to here, goes to there, comes to here, hooks up to these two terminals. Then from here on in, it's twisted. That's interesting. It's twisted very carefully. But these orange wires aren't twisted at all. The orange wires run back without really being twisted. These yellow ones you can see here are feeding a different voltage for the one tube that requires a different voltage, and that's the 227. So it gets its own filament feed right here on these yellow wires, which are twisted. Well, that's interesting. I wonder if disconnecting these orange wires and twisting them would have any bearing on the operation of this radio. It certainly can't hurt. But you'd wonder why they'd want to be so careful about twisting these filament feed wires. Let's take a closer look. I've got my close-up camera sitting right there. So these are the heater wires here, these really twisted ones. And the insulation looks fairly good on them because they haven't been touched. But I guarantee you, if we move these wires the slightest bit, the insulation will crack off them. Boy, that's pretty ugly looking, isn't it? Electrically it's fine, even though it's ugly looking. So if I am to replace these wires, I'm going to want to twist them up just as tight as these ones. And the wire I've got handy here, this is not solid core wire. It's not the best wire for doing this kind of stuff with. It doesn't hold its shape very well. If you bend it up, you can't get a really tight bend on it. Okay, so anyway, that's the one set of wires, the heater wires, and here of course are the orange ones out in the open here. Okay, so the next set of wires are wires that are entirely contained. Let me switch back to the bigger camera here, bigger view. Are wires that are completely contained here. They don't pass through the wall. So there's a bunch of wires, like for instance there's one here, it goes from here to here, that are just easy to get at both ends, don't pass through any holes, easy to work on. So maybe we can call those the easy wires, which I'm pretty intent on changing today. So here's an example of one right here. Let's go back to the close up. You see just how bad these ones are. So there's a wire here. Now that's not bare conductor you see under where the insulation is disappearing here. Okay, it's still insulated with a cloth covering. But you can see how bad this wire is. And right in here is a close point, right? So that's the kind of thing that someday could potentially be a short circuit, right in here. See, it's right up against it. And I suppose somebody could even argue, look at this, this is rubbing, well of course it's tied right to this terminal here, so it doesn't much matter if it shorts out to it. But that's the kind of spot. Now you see this wire back here. Oh, that's going through a hole. You don't want to look at any of those just yet. Or do we? Here's another. So here's an example where this might be a concern here. Actually, there's two examples right there. I'm looking right here, where the outer rubber insulation has failed, and again there's internal insulation in this kind of wire. It's not really meant for insulation, it's more meant, I believe, to kind of lubricate the conductor from the plastic and keep the when they extrude the plastic cover or rubber cover or whatever this black material is, they don't want it to go down into the actual strands of the wire. So they first cover the wire with something more inert, which is the cloth cover. Then they put this insulation over top, and it doesn't sink down into the individual wires. And this is really important for bending the wire. You need the conductor to move kind of freely against the inside of the rubber insulation as you bend this wire around, or else you're going to have trouble. Of course, look at what's happened after 90 years. So here's this one's in the same boat here. The crack is right up against the well, actually, you know what? It's not right up against it, isn't it? But it's pretty darn close. This other one is right against it. So there's very high impedances in this radio, very, very high resistance circuits. And something like this, you know, I guess you could stretch your imagination a bit and think, well, maybe there is a little bit of current leakage from the conductor right down into this, into the chassis. Maybe. Personally, I don't think it's a serious concern at this point, from what I can see. But you know, I think some people would say, "Oh no, that could be a problem." But here's another one that's badly cracked and running along the panel. Okay, so the last class of wire is the wire that goes through the hole there, like this one here. And there's nothing difficult about them going through the hole or replacing them, except on the other side there's no clearance to work, and the terminal is out of reach of the soldering iron, like I showed that in the last video. These wires, I'm not sure what to do. Each one of them is going to be its own case, I think. I really don't want to take the top part apart to really fully expose these terminals. Potential for trouble here is quite high. I mean, if it isn't happening already, and I don't think it is, but if it isn't happening already, it will someday. You will get shorts in here. I mean, it might be 50 years from now. I shouldn't be so worried, should I? Even Mr. M, who owns this radio. Well, you know what? He wants these radios to be in good condition so they will outlive him and become family heirlooms, basically, is what he's working on. So, can't leave this kind of stuff like this. If you really want to buy another 50 years on the life of this radio, these guys got to go. So, what's my technique here? If I try a full-blown replacement, I'm going to get into all the trouble on the other side of this panel with soldering the wires into place. And it looks bad to me. It doesn't look it looks like it's nearly impossible to do. So I have another idea in mind. I'm just looking at the size of the hole here in the wire. And I'm thinking, why don't I cut this wire, maybe cut it here, sleeve it, slide a sleeve over it through this hole, and then joint new wire onto it back here, and have a new wire carry on. Okay, so a couple of reasons why not to do that. One, I don't have anything, potentially I don't know this, but I don't have anything I can slide through here and cover this wire. Secondly, in the course of doing this, I'm going to crack off whatever's left of this insulation, for sure. So if there wasn't a risk at this point, there will be, unless I do succeed in sleeving it. So my best move at this point is leave these alone for now while I give more time, more thought, and take a closer look at them. Wow, there's really not much to them, is there? They just shoot right down here to the terminal. Wow, if these wires were flexible enough, I would say, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to push them through the hole until fresher insulation is sitting in the hole. But if I push these wires, this stuff's going to crack off. Don't believe me? Here, I've got a. Let's try one. Okay, so I took this piece of wire out. Look at that! Look at that! Look at that flat surface there. Wow. So that's where it was pressed up. It almost looks like you can see right through. Wow. I don't think you can. It looks like you can see right through to the underlying cloth insulation right in the spot there. You know what? Maybe I'm gonna. Take a look at that under the microscope, maybe. Yeah, maybe before I let me get a different piece of wire here to demonstrate. Okay, here's one. Okay, ignore the blue stuff. What am I demonstrating? You can't bend these wires far at all without the insulation coming off. Sure it's not already cracked, it's damaged right in there a little bit. Here we go. How far can you bend this wire? I'm trying to put the bend right here. Bending. You can't see it the way I'm doing it. Let me bend it up this way. Really hard. Well, it didn't. It sort of cracked open right in there. It had been cracked already. Try it here. I mean, if this doesn't break, it's very stiff. Oh, see, I felt it. Soon as I pushed hard enough, I could feel the insulation give, and look, a big crack has opened up on it there. So that's what's going to happen with any of these wires. I start fooling with them, this is what I'm going to end up with. Okay, and you can't rely on this cloth inside here, I don't think. So that's my big worry. I'll start into something and it's just not going to work out. That's going to force me into more and more. Look, wow, look at this piece up here. It's going to force me into more and more trouble. These ones, just these ones passing through the hole. The rest of them, I cut them away and put new ones in, no problem. That's my dilemma. What to do about those guys going through the hole. Okay, I'm going to get on with replacing a bunch of wires in here now. Okay, so I grabbed my cutters and froze right away because there's another little bit to the story here. which I hadn't talked about yet. So this big resistor here, as far as I know, it's okay, but I don't know very far. So I'm not sure about the value of this. It's supposed to be, well, you know, I've got two copies of the schematic. One of them, this resistor is shown with no value, and the other one, it has a handwritten value of 2000 written over top of the where this resistor is on the schematic. So I'm assuming this is supposed to be a 2000 ohm resistor. I can't measure it. It's in parallel with this coil. As long as it's in parallel with this coil, all I'm going to read is the coil resistance. I'm about to replace this wire, which goes to this terminal. This gives me a chance now to open up this resistor and actually test it, which I'm going to take. I'm going to take that opportunity. So I'm going to try to desolder this connection here. Just pull the... Probably once I start filling with this resistor, I'm going to have to change it anyway. It's a nice looking, great big honking old guy. But these appear to be tacked onto this terminal, and I can actually see a little piece of the lead wire. Let's take a look at that more closely. What I'm worried about is when I go to fiddle with this, I'll damage the fine wire that's inside this coil here. How you terminate the coil wires, they're almost always done the same way. The wire comes out and wraps around a terminal, and then that becomes the terminal you solder radio components to. But that wire is sitting right there, right under here somewhere. And fiddling with this terminal can sometimes cause trouble with the wire going into the coil. You know, everything you do here comes with a risk. You kind of move forward and backwards at the same time. Let's see if I can get my camera to look at that. How about a little focus? Okay, so I'm going to go for that upper terminal there. Soldering iron should be nice and hot. Soldering iron's at 358 degrees C. Must be a lot of terminal here. There we go. Oh, look at that. They're just tacked on. Come on up, come on up. Okay, that didn't do any damage. Pretty sure. But these wires have been kind of wrapped around the terminal, and I had to yank and struggle to get them off. And you run a bigger and bigger risk of interfering with this connection to the actual coil wire. Okay, well, we get to read the resistance of that resistor now. Let's do it the lazy way. Use that guy. Okay, here we go. $2,745 ohms. 2,700. Well, you know, that's not that far from 2,000, really. It's not exactly 2,000. Is it a sign of bad things? Would this cause a problem? There's some kind of filter thing going on here, I'm pretty sure, with the coil and the resistor. It's a handwritten 2000. Is that really correct on the schematic? I don't think there's any reason to change this at this point. Now I have a capacitor sitting right here too. It's a great big capacitor, which is I may be able to test it now. Now that this is disconnected from the coil, now let's give it a shot. See what the meter says. So one side of the capacitor is connected to the chassis. The other side is right here. The other, I guess you could say, side to a capacitor. Okay. Okay, so it reads the capacitor as 115 microfarads. Really? 115 microfarads. ESR is 150 ohms. Something wrong with the way I'm doing this test. I mean, I'm getting a capacitance. It's reading way high. That suggests to me that that capacitor is full of moisture. Looks like we're on our way to replacing all the componentry in here. In the course of doing that, I'm going to be moving these leads that come out of this transformer, and this, all that stuff I'm talking about with cracked wires goes on steroids at this point. These are often, these wires that come out of coils like this are often the actual coil wire. They're not, there's no terminal and then a stronger wires brought out. It's the actual coil wire from inside's brought out. The insulation here is probably stiff. It may be very different, but it's probably, I can only guess it's totally stiff. As I move this wire around here, so this really isn't insulation. This is, I think, a tube that's been slipped over. You can't really see what I'm talking about, so let me change again. Talking about this guy right here. This wire. So I think that's a sleeve that's been placed over it. See how it moves relative to the wire? A lot of space inside. So almost certainly the lead wire from this coil is coming out. And the reason I'm hesitant on this is because, again, I do the wrong thing, break this wire back inside, just inside this coil, and I'm in really big trouble. The chances are actually fairly low if I'm careful. If I'm not careful, the chances are actually much higher. The wire itself, the copper wire's probably got a coating of shellac on it, or something like that. And that is what the real insulation is inside here. Again, bending the wire, although this shellac is really adherent, like you can see it on, maybe shellack's not the right word, you can really see it on here. This gold, reddish colored stuff is really very, very adherent and flexible to a surprising degree. I wouldn't want to try it out. So what I'm doing here is I'm rolling around in my head as many issues as I can think of about fooling around with this capacitor. Okay, so the other lead from the, oh, that doesn't look very good, does it? The other lead from the transformer, rather, goes here. Looks like a really cold solder joint there. not very good at all. But this lead won't get flexed at all while I'm fiddling around with this capacitor. It's the other one. So I'm convinced to go ahead and remove all this. Remove the capacitor, the resistor, and renew it all. Size of that capacitor. Do I have it on the schematic? Ay. Let me peek quickly. I won't put it on a screen. I'll just take a look myself. Here. Give me but a moment. Just one more moment. There. Okay. I'm looking at the schematic now, and looking at that capacitor, and that's number 43. Yes, it's written here. 40. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. 0.002. So supposedly, this big capacitor here, 0.002 microfarads. See that nut down at the bottom there? That's how the capacitor is actually mounted in the radio. So the capacitor is mounted physically to the chassis there pretty solidly, and then it becomes a fairly rigid terminal at the other end for these other components. If I had to change all this around, I'm going to lose that terminal effect. Unless I use some kind of, unless I think about it. Plus, where this connection is being made up in the air here, it's the natural location of this wire. Unless I want to bend this wire, which I'm trying to avoid, I'll have to make the termination point up here in the air again. In the air. This is similarly. This is a wire with a sleeve on it. And sticking my fingernail into the sleeve, it's as hard as can be. I'm sure it'll crack. So that's going to go too. For now, I'm going to cut it down at this end. I'm going to cut this other wire. I'm going to go after that nut. We're going to pull this whole thing out. It's got to go at this point. It's got to go. Screw at the other end there. The nut, rather. I don't think I can get a nut driver down there. Just try a pair of needle nose. Whoops. I'm banging my head in my microphone. Here there. Okay. So, this kind of thing I'm about to do, this has been on my mind since I originally looked at this radio so long ago. So many videos ago. I kind of expected that someday I would get to this point. I've just been delaying it. Okay, here we go. There we go. Whoops, clicked the wrong thing on my computer. Started up started up SDR Sharp. I said, oh, every time I bump that wire, it's just, you know, you can think of these wires as having, you know, they're good for 7 more bends. You can think of it that way, and every time you bend it, you're 6 left, 5 left, 4 left. Why are you being so difficult? It's definitely the capacitor. Now, another thing I wonder about it, like this connection I'm undoing, this is just a nut turned down onto a bracket. This looks like a brass nut on an aluminum chassis, and it looks like the bracket is probably tin plated steel right on the capacitor. I don't know. They have all these different metals in contact with each other. Yes, they're not underwater, but nevertheless, in a humid environment, mixed metals. Many years. I wonder if the the electrical contact gives up the ghost, or becomes resistive, or in the worst case, I guess, would become capacitive. If the connection completely electrically gave up the ghost, it could be just like a capacitor sitting here. Some capacitors are made with metal rust, would be a crude word for it, but the patina that forms, especially on aluminum. So I wonder about these things. Here it comes, here it comes. Out she comes. Aerovox, USA. 0.002. Thank God. I was just praying there would be a value on here, so I know for sure I got the right capacitor. You see, this is in a sealed plastic thing, but how sealed can it really be? Let's put this guy to the test. Let me test it on the same tester as soon as I find it. Then we'll do it on the real capacitor checker. A machine that's really meant for these high voltage older capacitors. Hey, let's test the resistor first. Why not? Here we go. Slightly higher reading, 2854. Probably because of the contacts. Now, we'll read the capacitor. So a totally different reading now. 1800 picofarad. That's just under 2000 picofarad, which would be 2 nanofarad, which would be 0.002. According to this meter, V loss 0. So this meter is telling me this capacitor is perfectly good. It's a little bit disappointing because it's more fun to find bad parts that you can then blame bad operation of the radio on, but you keep finding good parts. You need a villain somewhere along the line. Okay, I'm going to check her with this one. to require some short leads here. And I don't know where they are. Okay, so, well, let's try it with these. A little long. Okay, so we're going to check the capacitor for leakage first. Put on 25 volts. This puts 25 volts of DC across the capacitor. And watch this. Now the eye should jump closed and then swing open again. It jumps closed as the current charge, where the capacitor gets charged up. The current flow will close it. Once the capacitor is charged, as a very small capacitor, should charge quick. These things should open. So with a good capacitor, this thing will just kind of blink at you, but end up open like it is now. Here we go. Just like that. 250 volts. May not have had contact here. It's reading suspiciously good. .25 volts. 150. 250. Wow, okay, so this is testing like a brand new capacitor. That's what it's testing like. We'll read the capacitance now. If no leakage, the reading should be very good. Should be reliable. For 0.002 to 0.5, so we're on the right scale here. And then watch the eye. Very clearly right there. You read the dial. Point. .25. .2 almost exactly. Well, okay, that tells a story there, doesn't it? It's a perfectly good capacitor. Doing a perfectly good job, probably. Now I've introduced a bunch of unnecessary work for me. I've removed some of the most original parts. Why not reinstall it? Provides back the terminal right in the right spot. Provides back this resistor right in the right spot. Why wouldn't I reinstall it? Look at it this way. This part, and unless I buggered it up now from what I've done by flexing these terminals, I've tried my best not to flex these terminals at all for fear of cracking them. But basically, this guy has proven his worth by surviving 90 years and still being perfectly operable. Why do I think I've got a better capacitor than this one? Or do I think 90 years old, it's only good for 100? I think reinstalling it is the thing to do. I think that's what's got to happen. What happened to the terminal? I won't reinstall it right now. I'll leave it out because there's a little more space in here now to work on some of these other wires. I'll put this back in later, but where did... Am I crazy? Where'd the terminal go? Have I lost my mind? I've lost my mind. Shouldn't there be a... What the heck? I've lost my freaking mind. What's the matter with me? I think I know what the problem might be. This is only coffee cup number 2 here, and I've hardly started it. Okay, big gulp of coffee. This thing was sitting here, was it not? And this nut was holding it, was it not? Okay, so I'm doing something really stupid here. Some of you probably know, you might know what is going on that is so stupid that I am doing. Holy smokes. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the screw fell out the other side. Oh, wait a minute, you know what? I am doing something stupid. It's up this way. I got it. Oh my gosh, the screw can fall out. Good show. Get my finger on it. Well, okay. Okay, no, I did not lose my mind. I just lost part of my mind for a brief period. That's what happened there. Okay. So again, I won't put this back in. I'll carry on with doing some of these various wires. That's the story there.
His view that there will not be the same kind of pressure with respect to this group that we saw a few months ago with respect to the Haitians, that the factors and circumstances are quite different. But the one good thing out of this situation is that, as requested, the United States has given a lengthy notice period here. It's 18 months into the future. We had requested that if they were going to make a change in the law that would have an impact on Canada, give us as much notice as possible. They have done that. We will use that time to prepare the necessary contingency plans. We had another task force meeting with provincial officials earlier this week to make sure that we're anticipating all of the various eventualities. We're also going to be outreaching aggressively to the Salvadorian community in the United States to make sure that they clearly understand Canadian immigration law, that crossing the border in an irregular fashion is not a free ticket to Canada. You will be apprehended, and the due process of law will apply. And if you look at the experience with respect to a big portion of that Haitian migration, the ones who were so far successful in making a case for asylum is less than 10%, and people need to understand the consequences of their behavior if they come to the border and propose to cross in an irregular fashion.
Thank you very much, Minister Goodale.
Thank you.
That was Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale. Later in the show, we'll talk more about the Cabinet Retreat and the Prime Minister's Town Hall Tour with our in-house panelists. Now, you can also listen to us by going to the CBC Radio app, or you can always subscribe to our podcast, that's what I do, through our website, Apple Podcasts, or any other podcasting app.
The Ethics Commissioner couldn't work with the Ethics Commissioner.
He's been working with the Ethics Commissioner.
Work with the Ethics Commissioner.
But he worked with the Ethics Commissioner.
Work with the Ethics Commissioner.
End of Mary Dawson's tenure as Ethics Commissioner could probably have been more politically charged.
Yikes.
But we're circling around. One of my very early reports kind of tried to get a bit of a definition of at least what it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's an awkward concept in a way. It's not in the code either, incidentally, in the same parallel provision. It's not listed as an exception.
Yeah, and you told MPs that that's another reason maybe it should be withdrawn because the two aren't harmonized. Now, another conflict of interest case that received a lot of public attention is that of Finance Minister Bill Morneau, and you weren't able to finish that investigation about whether Morneau broke rules when he introduced a pension bill that would benefit Morneau-Chappelle.
Right.
How come that work was left unfinished?
Well, I just didn't have time. That case was begun, I think it was in November. I've forgotten exactly when. But, the very first step you do when you decide to proceed with an investigation, if you haven't taken the time as well before that to look into it and decide whether you should institute, then what you do is you write a letter to both people, the people that complained and the people that are complained about, and you say, look, here's the thing, here's what you're being alleged to have done. You've got 30 days to come back to me with your initial reaction. And I got barely out of those 30 days when I had to leave. So, it was the beginning of the process.
You've said that you stand by your advice to Morneau that he didn't have to place his shares on a blind trust, but now your office agreed to investigate a complaint into behavior where it appears he followed your very advice. How do those two things jive?
This was a different provision. The advice that was given was on whether he needed to put his goods into a blind trust. That's a totally different issue from the one that's being looked at in the C-27 case. So we did not proceed with the other one. There was 4 or 5 requests that came in on Mr. Morneau, and a couple of them have been dealt with, and a couple of them, well, this one remaining one hasn't been, and I think there may be another one hanging around that has to be determined. There was, just a whole slew of them, but there were different issues. And on that giving advice, it really, my policy has always been to give hard advice and soft advice and distinguish between the two of them. Now, one has to say, the law does not cover indirect, and incidentally, in coming to that conclusion, we did quite a bit of research on what other similar legislation says, and almost to an act, and there's a fair bit of similar legislation out there, either provincial or federal, almost to an act, it says direct or indirect. And in this particular piece of legislation, it just says holds. Not only that, it was underlined 5 years ago with the recommendations to the committee. And I said, make this amendment. This is an amendment that ought to be made. And they didn't. But then it's pretty hard for me to turn around and interpret it differently.
That's been a real constant of your tenure, is that you have repeatedly raised problems with the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Act to politicians, and really nothing happens. So why do you think that is?
It's an act.
There's other things
It's
that
law.
we're dealing with, I guess. I also made a series of recommendations for the amendments to the code, the members' code.
It's a big deal to try to change something like that.
Actually, very close to the end of the last government, make a whole bunch of those, and I was delighted with them, such as you don't go talking about having sent a request for an investigation in until the person that you've complained about knows about it and has given me a chance to let them know. You know, a few rules like that they did make, and I was very pleased. But they haven't done anything with the Act yet.
And why do you think that is?
Well, I think they haven't done a lot of the access to information amendments. They haven't done lots of them. They choose what they want to deal with. And, I mean, maybe you're trying to make me say that...
Trying to get some solder down there.
It's because they don't want to make the rules more stringent for themselves. Who knows? You know, it's just not at the top of their priority list to date.
Oh, how...
You mentioned that you've had
Let's hope that worked.
complaints about Bill Moore knowing the fact that MPs
you couldn't see what happened
there.
there.
From Mary Dawson saying she's agreed to investigate. Your office has in many ways been used as a...
Sure, looks like I got it.
What was that like?
Well, that's why
What happened was,
delighted with that rule that they added to the code.
I grabbed this end of the wire here, and it was bloody hot.
At least under the code, under the Act, I guess,
All that way.
I'd like to see that amendment.
Now, there's something floating around in there.
They're still doing that, though, right? They're still doing that with the Act.
What is that?
That's right, because it's still open in the Act. There's no specific prohibition.
But still, what is that like when you know that you're being used?
It's unfortunate, but, you know, we're in a political world, and I recognize that political things happen. I just try and move on and do it properly.
I know that other agents of Parliament have come forward and put on the gloves and told MPs to...
The lock washer, that's probably
just...
just...
to do that?
has to do with that capacitor.
I did precisely that, and every time somebody sends in something to me and then goes and talks to the public, I write them a note back and say, that's not a nice thing to do and you shouldn't be doing it. But that's the best I can do. I mean,
so it was behind the scenes, really, because it wasn't...
Yeah, but the thing is, these things are confidential. I'm not going to go out and start stories about stuff well, of course, they've already got the stories out, and then I can talk about them. But, I mean, that's, I think, not my bailiwick, really. It's not a nice thing to do, and I've said it on the record. But, what more can I do?
I guess it's just letting Canadians know what you did behind the scenes.
Next wire down here.
In fact, it was in my last report, I think. That's the other thing. I always use my annual reports to really shine a light on a lot of the stuff we do. And I talk, for example, about the cases we didn't proceed with. I don't necessarily name the people, but I name the situation and why I didn't proceed. And I very often have matters of note in my reports where I talk about things that ought to be fixed or something. So I do try, and I'm actually quite proactive in making issues known in my annual report.
Your successor, Mario Dion, is on the front page of the Globe and Mail talking about the idea that it would be worth considering stronger penalties, saying it needs to be considered. What do you think?
I've said before, I'm not an avid penalty seeker. Penalties or fines belong in the criminal area as far as I'm concerned generally. But, you know, if you look back at my 5-year review again, my recommendations, you'll see that I said there may be some cases where something is open and shut. There's no point in having an investigation. It's clear that they've contravened something. That perhaps we could have similar administrative monetary penalties, at least, to those without going through the expense and the time of doing a full investigation, to be able to have sort of quick decisions on things that are obvious. There's room for penalties, but frankly, I think that's a parliamentary decision as to where they want to go. I know the Americans are much, in some cases anyway, in some states, much more prone to have big penalties. That's not my bent, but I quite recognize that maybe somebody else is bent, and if that's the case, that's fine. But I'm just not an advocate of heavy penalties. I think ethics is something that it's a little bit different from criminal offenses. When it's criminal, it moves into the other area. And when something incidentally has a criminal tinge to it that I see, I'm required under the Act to pass it on to the criminal people.
There always is that tension, you know, that where the public sees that it's a tension that's hard to reconcile for the
Criminal
public.
people would be the police, I think,
and
is what she
it
meant.
looks bad, it smells even worse, but somehow falls within the boundaries of the Act.
Right, and that's the kind of thing I've done observations in my reports quite often, where I say, you know,
Just having problems holding the camera in place
it's not
here.
against the law. A good example of that was one of my early reports, the checks report, where
Yeah, the giant checks with the logos of the Conservative Party on them.
So this is just a grounded terminal. This wire goes over to the ground terminal here.
I did a little report. I had an observation section, and in fact, before the report even went out, that was.
But I'm going to put the wire back in exactly the way it was. I'm looping around here.
And it never happened again.
I know that you've heard the criticism of your office over the years that being too easy on politicians, that investigations stretched on for too long, and that you interpreted the act far too broadly. How would you respond to those criticisms?
Well, I would say the length of time it took is the length of time it needed to take. A year is not, as far as I'm concerned, outlandish when you've got 7 issues, a number of witnesses, a number of documents to go through, the due process, and allowing the person that's alleged to have contravened time to
This one
react.
looks like it's wrapped. Whoops.
Yeah, and there's a number of those, and
This one appears to be wrapped.
Lawyers have their own tactics. Not that I'm necessarily.
Okay, I'm going to try and pull it out.
But I mean, they want to do it thoroughly, and they make their argumentation. But generally speaking, some can be done fairly quickly, but many can't.
What's next for you?
I don't know. I have not got any plans. I didn't know whether I was going to be leaving until almost on top of it this time. Three interim appointments. It did seem, that this was inappropriate to have 3 interim appointments. Would have been better just to appoint me for another 2 years, a year and a half ago or something. But I've been working very hard. I worked very quickly to get the Trudeau report out. Very hard. I mean, at the last minute when I knew finally that I was going. I had a bit of a busy Christmas period when I didn't get much time to Christmas shop, and I hadn't really thought as to what I would do afterwards. I'd like to do something meaningful, but I'm not sure what.
Well, I wish you all the best, and thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
That was former Ethics Commissioner Mary Dawson. If you want to get in touch with the House to tell us what you think about something you heard on the show or suggest political topics you'd like us to tackle this year, please email us at thehouse@cbc.ca. You can also get in touch on Twitter. Our handle there is @CBCTheHouse, and online you can find us at cbc.ca/thehouse.
Just changing a wire. How tough can that be?
The first official talks between North and South Korea in officials from North and South Korea mistrustful.
What's happening amid rising tensions with the U.S.
South Korean leader now says
Oh, I apologize for the sound of that radio.
after
bragging about the size of his nuclear button.
I think I have a radio that would be clear as a whistle in here.
Escalating tensions between North Korea and the United States have put the world on edge, with a potential nuclear showdown becoming a possibility, a scenario that would, of course, have global consequences.
I think that he always has to keep Kim on his toes. It's very important that we don't ever let him get so arrogant that he doesn't realize the reality of what would
The
happen.
people of this country should be concerned about the mental fitness of the leader of North Korea. He's made...
He knows I'm not messing around. I'm not messing around. Not even a little bit. Not even 1%.
Canada's Foreign Minister Christian Freeland and U.S.
Not even
Secretary
1%.
of State Rex Tillerson will co-host a meeting on the North Korean situation next weekend in
terrible.
Vancouver. One person who will be attending is the Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to Canada, Meng-Ho Shin. Good morning, Ambassador Shin, and thank you so much for coming to be our guest on the House. Next week, Canada and the United States are co-hosting an international crisis summit on North Korea in Vancouver. Do you think that
What?
China and Russia
I didn't
should
know
be
that.
invited?
It's the decision made by co-hosts in Canada and the U.S. It is not my position to talk about that.
That's kind of the answer I expected. Professional diplomat, but what do you feel can be achieved without those two nations at the table with everybody else?
I think this Bangkok meeting is held at a very critical, sensitive moment. As you know, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un boasted of his nuclear weapon on his desk. At the same time, international community is imposing sanctions on North Korea. But at the same time, now North Korean leader is showing some olive branch by saying that he would like to send big delegation to Pyeongchang Winter Olympic. So it is very critical and sensitive moment. At this moment, I think international community should show our strong will that we would not accept nuclear North Korea. So we should continue to impose sanctions and pressure on North Korea. But at the same time, it is important to lead this inter-Korean dialogue to reduce tension and improve relations between two Koreas, and also we should create favorable conditions for denuclearization of North Korea. So it is our target of this meeting.
How sensitive is the timing of this summit, given
That's good.
that the olive branch was extended so recently?
At the beginning, I'd like to say that this inter-Korean talk is a major breakthrough, considering last year's very heightened tension over North Korea's missile and nuclear test. But we should not drink champagne too early. Yeah. It is, I think, a significant step forward, but at the same time, I'd like to say that just the first one step has been taken. We have a long way to go because our target goal is denuclearization of North Korea.
I know that Chinese and Japanese officials have criticized this event in terms of saying it could hurt ongoing efforts to stabilize the situation. Do you feel that's a risk?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't. How's that happen?
Of course, there are many interpretations on North Korean intention. North Korea may want to drive a wedge between South Korea and the U.S.
Of course.
Of
course it does.
By time to develop further its nuclear
Yeah, of course it does.
And also, it may want to loosen international sanctions. But our alliance relationship with the
Okay,
US is very
let's see if we
strong,
can.
and we just would like to enlarge our window of opportunity to reduce tension and to seek more opportunities to denuclearize North Korea.
There has been an idea, too, that a goal of the summit could actually be to show the White House international agreement and commitment to alternatives outside of military action as well. Do you think that's a possible goal of this?
Yeah, I think so. It is the main purpose of this meeting. I think diplomacy is the only option left to us. War on the Korean Peninsula means death of millions of people. I heard that UK Prime Minister Churchill said that Georgia is always better than World War. I think diplomacy is the art of possibility. Yeah, all foreign ministers in Vancouver will seek all the ways and means for diplomatic solution.
I know that earlier this week on Wednesday, United States President Trump reportedly told Seoul that he would be willing to engage in talks on North Korea. Do you feel that would help the situation?
Of course. We should, I think, encourage North Korea to be more engaged in dialogue. I think President Trump intended to give some excuse to North Korea for saying to come to dialogue.
Why do we need the U.S. at the table on this?
North Korea has always said that their nuclear weapons is targeted on the U.S. Yeah, it is the main reason why the U.S. is main stakeholder.
And that's why Canadians are also...
Sure.
Thank you very much
Oh,
for
boy.
sharing this with today.
Thank you very much for your
Wow, 3 sneezes. Oh, look what I did. What happens if you're doing brain surgery and you got to sneeze?
Okay.
Somebody loses their mind.
Excuse me. I will respond to your question. I believe it was about Omar Khadr.
I was just curious how you feel about being the first prime minister ever found guilty of a federal
Over here.
crime.
There's people thinking about our place in the world and how Canada is, dealing with a somewhat unruly neighbor these days. Maybe not unruly, maybe unpredictable sometimes.
The return to work was anything but quiet for Justin Trudeau. The Prime Minister kicked off a town hall tour this week with more events taking place next week.
Okay.
There's also a little matter
Over
called
here.
NAFTA that took over discussions at the Liberals' cabinet retreat. Joining me now, our in-house panelists. Susan Delacourt, senior political writer for the Toronto Star and iPolitics, and Joël Denis Bellavance, parliamentary bureau chief for La Presse. Good to see you again. Good morning, Alison.
Good morning.
I know you both are watching town halls. What is your general takeaway from how they've been going?
It's better than it looks.
There's two parts to a town hall. There's the part that we get out of it by watching the Prime Minister.
Okay. 2
And
wires.
there's what he gets out of it. Did he learn anything while he was out here? Is it a different experience than he would get in the House of Commons or talking to lowly reporters like us? On all of those counts, I think it was probably a net gain for him. He saw that not everybody thinks he's wonderful, which is always a good thing for a politician to see. And we saw him having to manage himself. And the way he dealt with the dissenters, let's call them, was interesting. I think he probably, on balance, came out better for it.
Yeah. I would agree with that assessment. And also, I think for the Prime Minister, it's a way to reconnect with what the people are thinking. Get out of the Ottawa bubble, get into the Canadian...
Leave well enough alone there, Jim.
And talk to ordinary Canadians. And I think he realized that some of the issues that he faced in the House of Commons are still big issues outside of Ottawa. So that's a real test for a reality test.
The Canadian Prime Minister is doing a town hall tour through Canada.
But other than that, you know,
he goes into rooms with 5,000 people, and
so he's sort of filling a vacuum.
they ask whatever they want.
Publicity. I mean, I don't think the Liberal Party could afford the kind of publicity the Prime Minister is getting out of this tour, and I think it's a pretty astute move on his part to continue what is becoming, I think, a tradition for the Prime Minister to tour Canada in January.
And we should say he did do this last year, and it didn't inoculate him from the elite thing. It didn't put him more in touch with people as the year ended. The year started with concerns that maybe he was acting a little beyond average Canadians by taking that vacation. The year was punctuated with stories about
Canadians expect our politicians to be average people.
In touch with ordinary Canadians.
I'm not saying that's the case, but that's what we expect.
That way too.
We've seen sort of,
Or at least
also
behave like us. Behave like an average person.
Bubble, and I think these town halls did show that these issues are resonating and people are noticing them outside of Ottawa. Now let's move on to the cabinet retreat in London, Ontario. The Liberals
and our Prime Minister didn't. That's what the
second half of their mandate.
controversy is. Okay, next
what
wire.
Do Canadians can or should expect from their government, should they?
Well, I think what the Canadian government is doing right now is doing everything it can to save NAFTA. I don't think
this one.
Anything else like what their strategy has been so far, and I guess crossing their fingers that Mr. Trump will not tear NAFTA apart after the deadline that is fixed and that is postponing, I think, to July 1st now. But Mr. Trudeau made the right move a year ago when he made that famous cabinet shuffle and asked Christian Freeland as foreign affairs minister to take care of the NAFTA file. I think she's doing a great job. And she's also, I think, getting to know what Mr. Trump's strategy is. And this week we heard that the Canadian government was expecting Mr. Trump to pull out of NAFTA. And Mr. Trump gave an interview to Wall Street and Trump said, no, actually I'm going to wait until July 1st to extend the deadline. So maybe the Canadian government is knowing how to deal now with Mr. Trump by sort of playing some cards that Mr. Trump was not expecting. And then he's
a little nice and that hard, right?
Exactly. So I think it's The Art of the Deal, I think, is a book that was read by Christian Freeland, and she's applying some of the notions that Mr. Trump had put in that book.
But Trump didn't write that book.
I agree. The tone has been pretty good.
He had a writer write that book for him. And that writer will tell you Trump was useless at writing that book. Unhelpful.
And you know, talking to governors,
they talk about it being Trump's book. I don't know.
Is working as well because
okay, so it doesn't look
like
I can cut that.
As JD says, what they did
or desolder that.
The results of today. It's cautious good news at the end of the week, but it is a bit of a roller coaster.
Is there any risk here that all of the effort, all of the emphasis on NAFTA is distracting from other Liberal government priorities, things they really should or want to achieve by the end of their mandate?
That could be a collateral effect to the dominant issue that is NAFTA right now, but I think the government has no choice.
These connectors look like they've been folded over onto the wire.
Good and fluid.
If I heat this up, maybe the wire will fall out. If it doesn't fall out, then it's been crimped.
So I think
which is a problem.
The government knew that
Let's see what happens.
When Mr. Trump was elected, and now it has to be their focus, because if NAFTA is torn up and has some economic consequences, this is the government that will bear the responsibility of this.
Yeah, this is a government, to be fair, that always was going to be obsessed with the United States, always going to be fixed on it. I remember I sat
right out.
When nobody thought Justin Trudeau was going to be Prime Minister in June of 2015, he went over to the Chateau Laurier here in Ottawa and made a big, big speech about how important the United States was to any government. And within days of being elected, he started making plans to go to Washington. So Washington has always been a big focus of this government. I hear you though. I think there are probably
every Canadian government
that says, can we do anything else?
Every government in the world.
Occasionally, I find myself asking that too. But as long as somebody as volatile as Trump is there, it's hard to take your eyes off it.
Before I let you go, I wanted to ask you about the now non-affiliated Senator Lynn Bayak. She pushed back, or tried to push back this week against Andrew Scheer, Conservative leader Andrew Scheer, after getting kicked out of the Conservative caucus. She's continuing to defend her controversial views on residential schools. How should political leaders deal with people who hold such views inside their parties? Because every party has someone with controversial views.
I think what I would, if I were Mr. Scheer, I would explain that yes, we have freedom of expression, but freedom of expression comes with responsibility. You have to assume your responsibility and do it properly. And in this case, obviously, I think Madame Bayak did not fulfill the responsibility adequately in terms of what she said and what she's defending. We're in 2018. We're way past that. And again, if I were Mr. Scheer, I would send a copy of the official apology that Mr. Harper delivered in the House of Commons on that very same issue to Madame Bayak.
I think we've missed something. We've missed an opportunity here. She does represent, whether we like it or not, some views that are out there in Canada. And rather than just say, you can't say that here, or calling people racist, and as much as we may believe that, I think what we want, ideally, in politics is to change those views. And I really liked what Senator Lillian Dick said this week, is that she should have had enough guts to debate those views in the Senate, to come out and say. Instead, she did the equivalent of graffiti, posting scrawled things on the wall of her webpage. But if we want to have a serious debate in Canada about these views, and she wants to have one, let's have it. Right? Let's and maybe some minds will be changed. But that's me being maybe overly optimistic.
Well, I think that's a good way to be, and I think it's a good way to end this panel. So thank you very much, Denis Bellavance and Susan Delacour. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
That's it for us this week. Our crew on the House is producer Paul McInnes. Our senior producer is Nick Ganache. I'm Allison Crawford. Have a great weekend. The House is back in session in 7 days.
This is CBC Radio 1, 98.7 FM in Peterborough. An ancient male ritual was shaved by embracing masculinity. Shoeshiner Sean with champagne.
Oh my gosh.
And when a forgotten song was included in a hit movie, it made of a painted world rhapsodic. I see a little level of a brand. Old school products survive on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. This morning at 11:30, noon in Newfoundland.
You know how hot I'm getting this thing?
The CBC News is next, and then it's Day 6 with Brent Bambury.
China has shut the door to importing our recycling waste. That's bad news for some cities who've been shipping 80% of their recycling to Chinese plants. Is it time to rethink recycling? More on our series Wasted today on Day 6.
Oh, I really. I'm so worried that I'm doing damage to this radio. Heating up these terminals, none of this is good.
Yet again with some nasty winter weather. Highway washouts and mudslides are reported in Newfoundland. CBC's Matthew Bingley reports.
We're experiencing 90-kilometer-an-hour winds, which are making everyone's day very difficult. Anything that's not tied down is definitely blowing away, and as these rain bands continue to come in, they're blasting everything there, and it's really the story of the rain that will create the most problems. This morning, the temperatures make it feel almost spring-like, and that's created quite a bit of thaw, and that is going to really increase problems throughout the day as these heavy rainfalls happen on top of the frozen ground. They're worried about flash flooding. The temperature will later on in the evening drop off of a cliff, which is creating flash
solder here.
Also to the north of us in Fredericton, there are issues with freezing rain throughout the day. So quite a lot of problems to come. Matthew Bingley, CBC News, St. John.
In Montreal. Montreal, 2 teachers at Concordia University are being removed from their classrooms just 2 days after the school's president denied hearing rumors of sexual misconduct in the creative writing program. CBC News obtained a letter that warned the school about toxic culture in the program back in 2015. Rebecca
I'm a little
Anderson
frustrated.
is one of the students who signed the letter.
Well, we felt extremely dismissed by how the whole situation was handled, and we were extremely disappointed in that we just felt as though we were completely unheard.
The spokesperson for Concordia would not
Got
comment, but did confirm that an investigation has now begun and that it's going to be done by an external investigator. Some of Canada's most powerful MPs say they're considering giving a free pass to people who have been convicted of marijuana charges. The suggestion came out of a cabinet.
There's another one going from here over to this terminal.
Has the details.
One of the big challenges ahead is getting all the marijuana
But
regulations and public safety protocols in place in just 6 months.
before my frustration level gets out of control, I better stop for a while.
People who've been convicted of possessing small quantities of
Okay.
pot. Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale.
The responsible
Fiddly task.
analysis, see where the unfairnesses are, and take the appropriate steps to correct those problems. But you need to do it in a
Task which I'm pretty sure at the end of it, the radio is going to behave exactly as it always has.
Describing obscene comments reportedly made by U.S.
Oh, and I apologize again for the quality of that radio we were listening to. It's just another thing I need to fiddle around with here. Okay, that's it. Thanks so much for watching. And, more tedious work is coming. Don't worry.